Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for watching. And in this video you are seeing one of the most crazy kit bashes that I think I've ever done. This is a mix of a cerastus knight castigator and a great unclean one. So he's been done to make it represent like the pilot has been, sacrificed to the chaos gods, and the great unclean one's possessed him and is basically ripping out of the knight, so kind of half possessed, half bursting out, and just a little bit crazy really. So yeah, stick around and we'll show you how the full build goes. Now the first thing to show is the great unclean one. So this is Rotigus. So I've built the great unclean one as that special character because it gives you a plethora of spare parts. So a lot of people have asked, has it taken a lot of money to make this kit? And it kind of has, because obviously the knights are expensive, but it literally is a knight and then the spare parts left over from building the great unclean one as Rotigus. So you can see here I've taken the knight to this kind of build stage. So I've built the entire torso, left all the armor panels off, left the top armor panel loose, the shoulders and the shins and all that kind of stuff. And then I've got all the spare parts from the great unclean one kit built to a certain level. Now, you can see there the first head I picked up has been assembled because it comes in multiple parts. The second head I'm picking up hasn't, because the first head's the one I intend to use. This second one's going to be spares. So I've taken all the spare parts, built some of them up because I know I'm going to need it, like the head. Others I've left in complete empty pieces, like some of the extra arm panels, some of the stomach panels that go on to other, obviously, variety of builds. Particular one there with the kind of guts, whereas Rotigus has the teeth. So I've got the spare parts, I've built the model to a certain level, and I've mixed up some milliput. Two-part kind of epoxy putty. You could use green stuff. Milliput is a lot cheaper. It's a bit heavier, but for this purposes, the cheapness makes sense to make the build, as reasonable as possible. So I put a big blob of milliput onto that front torso, and then pushed the great unclean one head, is the one that I fancied using, into that milliput. Done the same with the stomach parts, kind of at the bottom, because I want it to represent the great unclean one bursting out kind of from the kind of main body where the pilot would be in, that's kind of been possessed potentially. Taken the other part, which is like a sort of stomach part with some of the pustules and things in there, and push those into the milliput. Now, before the milliput dries, it's probably about half an hour at this point, I'm just using a sculpting tool that's been covered in water so it doesn't stick to the milliput, and putting in kind of extra folds of flesh. As I've gone around doing the sculpting, that's kind of been the main thing, because the great unclean one has got folds of flesh going all over the place. So putting in some of those extra folds. And then I'm pushing in here some little balls of milliput and green stuff that I've made previously on previous projects. So literally at the end of using some, rolled some tiny little balls of various sizes, and pushing those now into some of these folds of the flesh of the great unclean one, knight, I don't know what to call it really, the monstrosity. And then I'm using the very end of this sculpting tool to poke some tiny little holes. Because when you look at the actual sculpted model, it is folds of flesh, it's kind of these pustules, which I'm representing here, and then it's these kind of little weird nodules where you've got some little holes and stuff amongst the flesh. So I'm trying to kind of replicate that, and I think when you see on the finished effect, I've done a relatively good job of blending kind of this in. So I worked on that main torso area. Now it's important to note that I've been test fitting armor panels and other things as I've been going, to make sure I'm not going to get too much in the way with what I'm doing, because I do want it to, still look like a knight and not too obviously mutated yet. So the side armor panel I put on here, another blob of milliput to stick it on. And then I've almost peeled open these armour panels, sliced some chunks out, and then when you stick it in again, sculpting tool straight away, and make the milliput blend into the armour. Again, because I don't want it to look just like a great unclean one stuck onto a knight. I do want it to look like it is kind of halfway coming out, and I think the organic pieces I'm putting in here, peeling the armour open, sort of works quite well. Now this is what started the idea of this conversion. I was kind of thinking, I'd done my cerastus Knight Lancer, fancied doing the castigator, saw the sword, and literally the first question was, is the great unclean one sword the same sort of size? And that's what started the thought process for this. So this is a fairly simple switch over, just taking the clippers to just the area above the sword. Now you could almost say, why didn't you do this before you assembled the arm and put the sword together? Could have done that, but I wanted to try and just, build enough up to see if it would kind of match. And if it didn't match and it wasn't the right size, then I wouldn't have swapped the sword over. But really cutting it down to the part where the hand piece with the great unclean one sword is going to fit nicely enough into the kind of socket of the mechanical sword. Now, plastic on plastic, you would assume you could use plastic glue, but what I have done is I've glued in a support strut made out of a piece of sprue, you can see there, and then I've actually put milliput onto both sides of this joint. Because again, when this sets, it sets absolutely rock solid, and also enables me to sculpt it through, because what I want it to look like is the kind of great unclean one has possessed the main part of the body, and he's kind of sending these possession pieces sort of down the arm of the knight, and it's burst out the end, and so it's all fleshy and there's kind of a hand. So I've put milliput around the first couple of joints, and again, same process, smoothing in and making it look like rolls of flesh coming in. Put some of these little pustules that I've made out of milliput and green stuff, and then after that then continuing to sort of smooth it around, but also using the end of the sculpting tool to dot some little kind of pits into it. And that seems to be how the Great Unclean one has been sort of sculpted all around. Now when you're doing it on this piece, which is way away from the main body, you could make it slightly different, but I want to follow the same trends. Now what I've done all around as well is, if I notice a part where I'm not happy that there's enough milliputs in, I've made a sausage of milliput rather than like pushing a blob in, because again, the way the Great Unclean one sculpted, putting an extra sausage of flesh on actually adds to the kind of gross rolls of flesh that the Great Unclean one has. So if you find a spot around it where you think I'm not quite happy, a roll of green stuff, or milliput, would work really well. And again, no real advantage or disadvantage using milliput or green stuff other than the sort of cheapness. And you can see there as I'm poking the end of the sculpting tool in to make these little pits. And I tend to do everything in threes. So you'll see there I've done 3 balls of milliput. Well, it's actually 2 green stuff and 1 milliput of different sizes. 3 little pits to make it fit. And again, every time I'm working with this, keeping the milliput damp, keeping the tools damp so it doesn't stick to everything. And then if you get any stuck on your fingers, you know, after maybe 5-10 minutes, just get it cleaned off, because you don't want to make too much of a mess as you're going to try and keep sort of super clean. Now this is from the flail that one of the version builds of the Great Unclean one has. So cutting it down just to have the 3 kind of skulls, using again some milliput in from underneath the model and pushing it up into here. Now what you could do, a bit of super glue or a bit of plastic glue, and you could just glue it on and then put the milliput around it. But what I'm going to do later on, I don't actually think I show it in the video, is to put some fleshy milliput areas around and underneath to kind of seal it all in. Kind of the top carapace, obviously we've stuck the Great Unclean one head on and it's covered in horns and spikes, so I've test fitted it, kind of matched up where I need to bend this plastic out of the way, and all I'm doing is literally putting little nicks into it and then using the force of the clippers to sort of bend the plastic out of the way so it looks like the antlers and horns have burst their way through the carapace. Slide it on, test fit it, wasn't quite fitting right there, so go back to it again and just do a bit more work with the clippers. So I've done 2 slightly different styles. So the actual armour panels on the chest I did just chop out. The armour panel at the top I've more bent it back to look like it's burst through. Not quite sure which I like the most, but you know, nothing wrong with different styles. You see the top carapace there, I've put a plug of milliput into the pilot's cockpit area. Didn't put the pilot in, didn't put the seat in, because save that for a later project. So a big plug of milliput in there, and just bending back the top hatch so it looks like this horn has burst through, taking one of the alternate heads that we're not using, slicing the horn out and having that horn bursting through the sort of top of the carapace. Now I don't think I've gone too far in the amount of conversions and crazy spikes and stuff I've put across, because you could do an awful lot more. You know, look here, you've got the head sticking through, you've now got the spike coming through the top carapace, but really that's it with that top carapace. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know that I've put loads of mutated pieces on or whatever. I didn't do any of that this time because I wanted it to look fairly fresh, hence the livery we end up using on the knight rather than being the full Death Guard green. Now I've drilled a hole through one of the shin armour panels, and what I measured up there was the tongue from one of the alternate Great Unclean one builds. So I'm following the pattern I've done already, just taking the clippers and just bending some of this plastic back, because I thought a clean drilled hole looked a little bit too neat. So just bending it back, and you'll see me fit that later on. So you can see now where we're at. At each stage when I'm putting panels on, I'm putting a little bit of milliput onto there, moulding some skin in, whatever, then stopping, moving on, letting it set, and really looking, am I happy with it? And I felt that the legs didn't really have enough sort of demonicness. Again, I don't want it totally demonic. I want it to look like this has just started to take over. But I've used a block of milliput around the front part of that right sort of thigh area, wrapped it around the back. You can see here doing the same principles, you know, making these rolls of flesh at the back here, and I'll do the same process, you know, putting the balls of the green stuff and milliput in, doing little pits, etc. Pulling around to the front, and I started to do some rather big rolls of flesh, and it didn't feel like it was quite right. I was, you know, I got to this point and went, no, I don't think this is going to look good. So went to the spare parts again, clipped off a couple of little pieces that have got, again, their own rolls in, their own like little pustules and things, and pushed them into the milliput sort of block that was on the thigh. And that can be a great way of making it mesh in, because you're almost playing off those plastic parts that you know are going to look right, and then you're only having to match up smaller areas rather than a whole block of milliput. Because to be honest, that kind of skill level's probably beyond me. Maybe if I spent a bit of time I could definitely do it, but it's a lot easier making smaller areas match the plastic plugs you've put in. Definitely an easier way. Again, when it comes to like where these kind of areas meet the metallic areas, I'm just kind of smudging it out. You'll see that on the sort of groin plate. I've just kind of smudged it out across the armour so it looks like it's very, very thin kind of possession. Same here, wasn't quite happy with how that plastic plate was going out, so I made a little sausage like we did before, and it looks like, again, a roll of flesh that's going to go around the top of that area that we've put in. So again, I would say that's the piece to think about, is that try and make it look sort of natural, but it is a demonic creature taking over a knight. So, in the grand scheme of things, if you've got a few areas that look a bit rough, look a bit patchy, it doesn't matter. You can fix that later on with your paint scheme, or you can just leave it to look a little bit chaotic and messy. The beauty of this kind of conversion is that, it's not going to look pristine and neat. Now, the sort of final stages of the sculpting area, all I was doing now is taking some bits of milliput and just kind of going around and finding areas that I thought, right, let's put a little bit of that demonic aura kind of in there, because it looked maybe the transition between the head here and into the armpit didn't look quite right without some. So again, same principle. It was actually easier around the neck area here because you were working straight off where the face was. So putting those rolls of flesh in became a little bit more obvious kind of how they were going to go, and the thickness that they're going to go. You've got the kind of jowls of the great unclean one. So making the next set of kind of flesh folds was easy because I just matched the same size and just, worked off and back from there. So you can definitely play off the parts that you're going to put on here. I did actually end the build with some parts left. You'll see on the cutting mat just beneath, you can see the shin panel, which we've not put on yet, but it's all prepped, and you can see some of the parts there. I didn't use all the spare parts from the other great unclean one, so you could definitely do more. You could spread it down the arms, you could do whatever, but I think we've got the right kind of balance. Now, I wanted something else around the waist of the model because it didn't feel quite balanced enough with the level at this stage, so I chopped down the rest of the head that we've used already to get this kind of gaping maw piece, and I wanted to fit it just under kind of the waist area of the model. So it looked like the front of it was where all the possession was taking place. Another plug of milliput, and unfortunately a lot of filming, the actual bolt cannon got in the way. Hindsight, I probably wouldn't have glued the bolt cannon on yet because it probably didn't need to be, but I was working ad lib as I was going with the plan really. So I've done the same, put that open mouth into the waist, and then done the same sculpting process we've seen already. Now this is the bit you've seen me drill the hole through and peel open already. Again, plug of milliput in there. And I will work at the back there, and you'll see it later on when we do the 360 rotation to do the pustules and all the same stuff. But just having that tongue from the Great Unclean one bursting out of the armour panel, just for a little bit of weirdness really. This is probably the part of the build that I'm not 100% sure works. It kind of throws off the balance of the model a little bit. But, you've got to try these things and you've got to do a little bit of demonic weirdness. So again, this is where I was at this kind of stage, pulled the video up. I'm not sure if this is the one I put on Instagram or not, but just kind of looking around, you can see where I've put a little bit on the back, a little bit on the waist there, and really just keep going until you think the balance of the model is happy. You can see the pustules and things I did on that left ankle where the thing comes out. Now, this is the ammo belt. I did film quite a lot of the building of this ammo belt because I think the construction of this ammo belt is amazing and one of the best things that Games Workshop have done in years. How they've got these ammo links to work so much better than some of their previous kits. Maybe I'll do a little short on that at some point. Basing, always important, but I've done a super simple base just using the green stuff wool roller and some milliput to make it match into the rest of my army with the kind of cobblestone effect that I'm going for. Stuck the model to it, and then this is kind of where we're at. Now, before I finished it off or starting the painting scheme again, no painting is going to be in this video because it's long enough as it is. I did the battle damage stage, so just going around with a craft knife, taking some edges off to make it a little bit kind of look like it's been in the wars a lot. Not as much as another kit, because again, I want this to look like a recently turned and captured Imperial Knight, but a little bit of battle damage, took some pin drills and drilled some bullet holes, as you can see on that shin there, and then it's the painting process. Now, I'm not going to go into the painting process now. If you want to see that, drop some comments below and I'll maybe do a painting video on this as well. But started off the same as with any other videos, really with that kind of metallic spray, and then build up the paint scheme. And I wanted it to look again like an Imperial Knight that has fairly recently been converted to Chaos, which is why he's in this more of a vibrant, dirty yellow scheme rather than the usual kind of Death Guard green scheme that I would do on my Knights or big stuff. So there we go. I hope that insanity kept you entertained. If you did enjoy that, like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube jazz. And hopefully I will see you on another video, which could be the painting video for this, or could be any one of a number of crazy projects I've got in mind. See you all soon.